Welcome, on behalf of Associated Builders and Contractors of Western Washington's Professional Development Council, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Jared Malone, Membership Development Manager here at ABC, and I would love to chat with you more about your membership. In the meantime, please enjoy this Cybersecurity Best Practices presentation by ABC member Scott Anderson of Kelley Connect.
Welcome to today's webinar on cybersecurity best practices. Excited to talk to this group about how to protect your organization from ransomware and other technology disruptions, which I'm sure we are all familiar with in general, and in today's COVID time is just getting more and more of an issue. I'm Scott Anderson, Senior Vice President at Kelley Connect of IT Services. Kelley Connect is an IT services, technology services, and office equipment firm serving the 5 Pacific Northwest states of Oregon, Washington, Montana, Idaho, and Alaska. Thanks for having me today. As we dive in, we're going to cover a quick agenda here. I'm sure there'll be questions that it generates, so we'll most likely have a follow-up conversation as well. And our agenda today is really, why is this happening, or I should say, why is this important, and who is it happening to? Cybercrime is not just happening to a small group of people. So why it's important, who it's happening to, how the bad guys get in. We'll go into a little detail on that, and probably most importantly, what framework an organization should follow to protect themselves, and what you can do both individually and organizationally to protect your business. So first, the why. Why is this happening, and why are small businesses prime targets? Most of the companies watching today, I believe, are what we'd consider smaller, mid-sized businesses. So why are small businesses prime targets? One of the first reasons is budget. Small businesses spend less than enterprises do. They can't afford the same enterprise-grade technology, security technology, that an enterprise can. A lot of times there's low IT skill level, both within the organization in general and even on the IT support team. Many small businesses have aged equipment or unpatched or unmaintained devices. Maybe a company is still running Windows 7 or Server 2008, which both went end of life in January of this year. Is a security risk. A lot of times the owners, as we all know, wear too many hats, are doing too many things, and security is not a focus. It's at least not a focus until it should have been a focus and there's an event. A lot of times small businesses don't believe it will happen to them. Why would I be a target instead of a larger company with more to steal? Which ties into a lot of small businesses don't believe their data is valuable, which we'll talk about a little more as well. And one of the biggest reasons small businesses are targets is because employee education happens less at the small business than it does corporately. So we're not educating our employees enough in the small business landscape. Because who are the victims? 58% of victims are small businesses. So the majority of businesses targeted are small businesses. So it is happening to small business, which is why we all need to be very aware and take steps to prevent this. And how is it happening? I think it's key to know how it's happening so we can talk about what we can do to prevent it. First thing is, it's a constant threat. Cybercrime is a big business. It's an enterprise business, and it is a constant threat. And 93% of phishing emails, or spam emails as we used to call them, involve ransomware. That is a lot of ransomware being sent through email over the internet, trying to get somebody to click on it. And a lot of those phishing emails and that ransomware comes in from social engineering. So social engineering, meaning an email sent that looks like it is from the CEO or from a coworker or from another company that you deal with regularly. And these social engineered emails are so effective because cybercrime is big business, and cyber criminals employ legitimate marketing departments. Marketing departments that are better than a lot of the marketing departments in small business are actually behind this cyber crime. So they are being successful with that approach. And then 91% of cyber attacks start with phishing. So phishing is a big deal. When small businesses are attacked, it's not normally that somebody attacks the firewall and logs in remotely. It's starting with a phishing email that somebody clicks on within the organization, which ties into number 5, is that clicking on these phishing emails is human error. So when we enter our credentials into a phishing email, that is human error, which will tie back into the prevention as well in terms of how do we train our people. And number 6, we should lead with only 50% of small businesses consider training a necessity. When we look at that, 90% of breaches are due to human error, but only 50% of businesses consider training a necessity, something's out of whack there. And so with that, we talked about phishing a bit, and that phishing is a big piece of this, and 91% of breaches start with phishing. There's 2 types of phishing we should be aware of. The first type of phishing is credential harvesting. A credential harvesting phishing attack is when you receive a spam email. Probably doesn't look like spam, but it's a spam email, and the goal of the email is to get you to click a link that leads you to some sort of web page that asks for your credentials. Oftentimes, this will be a fake Office 365 email, a fake LinkedIn email, a fake Google Drive or Apple ID email that looks fairly real and has some urgency behind it. Reset your Office 365 password before your account expires, or you're low on OneDrive space. You need to enter your credentials. When you enter your credentials, you are not logging in to the account you think you are, but your credentials just got harvested or stolen, and now those credentials are out on what we call the dark web for sale. Why that's important is because people reuse passwords so often. So when somebody steals your Office 365 password, not only can they overtake your Office 365 account, they probably have a good chance of getting into other accounts as well. So credential harvesting is one type of phishing, or as we call business email compromise. The second is malicious payload. And we mentioned that 93%, I think is the statistic, of phishing emails that contain ransomware. Malicious payload phishing is when an spam email comes through, again, that looks legitimate, but the attachment is some sort of malicious payload, a lot of times ransomware. So we've probably seen them where it says invoice on the attachment or purchase order. When we click those, all of a sudden a payload runs. Sometimes the payload directly infects the computer. Other times the payload just hangs out behind the scenes and gives the bad guys an entry into the network. So we need to distinguish between those 2 types of phishing because they lead to true business email compromise. Credential harvesting on one hand, malicious payload on the other, both causing harm to the organization. And why is this so important in a real world example? And as a technology services company, we work with our clients to train them. And part of training is testing after training. And we do this regularly. And the stats in this example are overwhelmingly accurate to the average, I would say, industry-wide. In this case, we ran a phish test campaign where we sent out fake phishing emails to a company. To this company, we sent 265 emails. So the company had around 265 employees. We sent 265 fake Office 365 emails. Of those 265 emails we sent, 153 were opened. So first mistake, they were opened. Normally, bad things don't happen when they're open, so not a huge red flag yet, but 153 were open. 44 were clicked. So in the body of this fake phishing email, there was a link to an Office 365 portal. 44 of the 265 users clicked that link. When you click the link, bad things can happen. In this case, nothing bad happened yet. The scary part here is that 28, So roughly 12% of the organization then entered their real life Office 365 credentials into a fake Microsoft portal. At that point, 28 employees of this 265 person company, their credentials were harvested, their accounts were overtaken, and anything could have been done using those email accounts. So scary when you think 12% of the population in this company was harvested. When we do this on a scale of a 20 user company or a 400 user company, we typically see the statistics right around the same. The exciting part is when we see security awareness training implemented in a company, we consistently see these numbers and percentages drop over time. So what can we do? One thing to think of is to know the NIST core components. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but there are certain pieces to NIST that are great to understand, because this is how we put a framework around the security policy we need to put in place for our company. The first is identify. Identify the threats. Identify the threats that can target your organization. The second is protect. What do you have in place to protect against these threats? A protection layer might be endpoint protection on your laptop that helps to stop ransomware and other threats. Identify, then protect, and then detect. So how do we detect? Meaning there was some sort of vulnerability. Maybe the protection didn't work. It got through that endpoint protection. How do we detect now that there is a gap in protection and that we need to do something further? The fourth is to respond. We've detected that there is a vulnerability. We've detected that maybe there is a breach. What is our response plan? How do we respond to that threat? And then the fifth is recovery. How do we recover from a breach? At the end of the day, the last point of recovery is restoring from backup systems. Obviously, we'd rather not get to that stage, but how do we recover if all else fails? So we really like to see a framework from a cybersecurity strategy standpoint built around the NIST components. And when we walk through this continual circle, we can develop that strategy. So first identify, then protect, detect, respond, and recover. And tune in for part 2 on the NIST framework in general, where we'll be able to dive into this more real world and talk about how this can be implemented in a small business. It's not just a big corporate framework. So as we go into that, a couple other things we can do. And I think passwords are a big thing that is overlooked too often. And I ask this question in person when I present in person often and ask, which of these 2 passwords on the screen are stronger? Normally, 90% of the room raises their hand on the second password, the W3 $EF9Q. Why? Because it has capitals and it has lowercase, because it's got a number sign character, and because we've been taught over time that complex passwords are the way to go. But what's the problem with that password? How do you remember it? The top password, ball hidden red sun, is what we call a passphrase. When I was putting a presentation together a while back, I looked around my living room at 11 p.m. on the couch, and I saw a ball, I saw something hidden, something that was red, and I thought of my son. And the passphrase became ball hidden red sun. But still, most of the time, people think the bottom one is more secure. Here's the math behind that, though. When you look at how long it takes to crack a password with an automated password cracking tool, which is a real thing, you can see that the bottom password takes 17 hours to crack in a password cracking tool. It uses numbers, uppercase and lowercase, letters and symbols But because it's only 7 characters long, it only takes 17 hours to crack. On the flip side, ball hit in red sun is 16 characters long. So even though there is no complexity to it, it takes 512 M. I'm not even sure what that means, but it's a lot. I think it's million. 512 million years to crack that password in a password generating tool. This is because for every character that's added to a password, it increases the length of time it takes to randomly crack a password. So it helps us a couple ways. One, it is less complex, which means you probably won't have to write it on a sticky note and stick it to your monitor or under your keyboard. And it's much easier to remember. But then look at the difference in the level of security it provides just with length and with no other complexity in it. So think about that as you create passwords. We like to think of them as passphrases today, and longer is better. What else can we do is we can train our people. We saw in an earlier slide that only 50% of small businesses train their people on security. We need to train our people regularly, and we need to create a security culture. How do we do security awareness training? There are so many ways, but the way not to do it is annually. We have to train our people more than annually. We believe a solid security awareness training program looks like an annual training, either in person or web-based. And then we believe testing comes in with training as well. Testing could be sending out those fake phishing emails bi-monthly or quarterly. And when somebody clicks on a link or fails the test, guess what happens? They reapply for additional training on what they clicked on. They volunteer for additional training, we like to say. So we run those tests bi-monthly or quarterly, which again keeps it top of mind, front of mind. Additionally, as new employees start, they should be enrolled in training as well. So how are we training our new employees through a web-based program? And then we start that cycle over each year with new training. The goal with that training being that we create a security culture, that it's something that's talked about regularly and that it's front of mind. We want to create the culture that when somebody clicks on that email link they shouldn't, typically their first thought is to slide down lower in their cube and hope nobody saw what they did, rather than stand up and scream, hey, don't click on this email, which is what we want them to do. So security awareness training is probably the single biggest way to stop threats before they enter the network. So some ways we can prevent business email compromise. And business email compromise, phishing is a part of that. Business email compromise is when our email is compromised. And again, is the way 91% of breaches start. First way is be skeptical. Should always be skeptical of email. You know, as an example, if you're in finance and are looking to wire money, but there's a last minute change in wiring instructions or recipient account information, or something we saw in our client base recently is a last minute change in a ship to address of a large order. Any of those things we should be skeptical about. Don't click it. Do not click. Verify changes in information by the contact on file. Don't contact the vendor through the number provided in the email. Business email compromise tries to look like a valid email. When you call the phone number in the email, that could be a direct dial number to somebody in a whole different place. So if you don't know, if you can't validate, if you haven't verified, find the real number and call that number and then ask for the person you're talking to. Double check the URL before you click in an email. Double check that it's the correct URL. You can make a URL in an email look like anything. The easiest way to make sure you're clicking on the right URL is to hover your mouse over the URL in the email, and it will show you where it's actually going to take you. So it could show www.amazon.com, but it might be taking you to a whole different website. So make sure you're clicking the right URL. As simple as it sounds, spelling counts. A lot of times phishing emails are not the most grammatical in nature. Spelling counts just in grammar, and spelling counts in domain names. So a lot of times the domain name might look legit when you're 3 feet away from your computer, but when you really get close, it does not. There was a phishing scam going on from Microsoft, but it wasn't really from Microsoft. It was from @Milkrosoft, MLC. Guess what the L looks like when I'm 3 feet away looking at my monitor? It looks like an I. So double check and look for misspellings. And make sure it's a match. Verify the email address matches, especially on a mobile device. Make sure that it matches who it's coming from, right? Coming from the CEO of a company using a Gmail account, probably a little fishy. And pay attention, right? Kind of like be skeptical, pay attention. There are often clues with business email compromise. A lot of times we don't see these clues though until we go back after the breach and think, oh, wow, there were some big red flags that I missed. Somebody who doesn't normally interact with the CEO receives an urgent request from the CEO. You see data from an employee that shows they're in one location, but they're in New York a couple hours later. You see activity from somebody who should be on vacation, on leave, is out of the office. Pay attention to those clues that you would look for after the fact, but look for them before the breach. And like I mentioned earlier, stand up in your cube, raise your hand, create a security culture. If you see something or click something, say something. Stand up and yell about it. Tell your neighbor so that they don't do the same thing. That's better for your business. Couple ways as we close up here, a couple ways that we think are easy tools that can help here are go through an activity to call out where the gaps in your security program exist. All of us have gaps in our security program somewhere. And it's okay to have gaps because the only way to fill gaps is with budget. And all of us have some sort of finite budget. So what we want to make sure we're doing is remediating the biggest gaps, the gaps that will cause the biggest impact to our business. A lot of times though, in IT, sometimes IT people are scared of calling out the gaps because they're partially scared of saying it costs money to fill gaps. We believe the best approach is to get all the gaps on the table, talk through them, and then make educated business decisions on which ones we actually remediate. It's okay to have some gaps. It's not okay not to know about your gaps. So we have a document we're happy to share with you. We call it the 15 ways to protect your business from a cyber attack. It is a great place to start to essentially check the boxes for where you have those gaps filled today and circle the ones that need attention. And then start discussing of the ones circled, is that something we even need to address? Yes or no? If no, great, don't worry about it. But at least you've talked about it. If yes, start prioritizing how you're going to start filling those gaps in place. We believe starting with this document helps you to create that security strategy in a simple way and lets you ask the right questions. Another thing we think important is researching yourself, researching your company, looking at the dark web. We mentioned the dark web is where usernames and passwords go to be sold on the black market because that is where cybercrime starts. Why is this important? Because most people use the same credentials, the same passwords across multiple sites. So when they set their LinkedIn account up at your company domain name, using your company domain name and email as the username, chances are that password is used somewhere else, maybe corporately on your network, maybe to your online banking, maybe to your QuickBooks account. So check the dark web for how many of your users' credentials are on the dark web just waiting to be sold to the right bidder. This is a report you can run. We're happy to run this for you and send this to you. And it is a report that can be run regularly for you so that it will alert you of, hey, a credential just did hit the dark web. It's going to happen because websites get breached. When it does, time to change your password. So another way to proactively get ahead of business email compromise. Hopefully that was a quick rundown of the how and the what and the why behind cybercrime. We're happy to share with you, both run a dark web scan for your organization and to share our 15 ways to prevent a cyber attack in your business document with you. Feel free to email us at info@kelleyconnect.com and we're happy to share those with you. And tune in again when we'll break down the NIST framework in more detail and how to apply that to your business. Thank you.